This one's called Transition Practice. My yoga teacher keeps asking me to slowly transition from one practice to the next. I'm like, Guru, please. The day I see you cat-cow in heels and lash extensions is the day I know you're an ally for my real transition. Hi, my name's Shay. They, them, she, her pronouns. I am probably a failed poet, beginning to move into comedy. Find me at Shay, SHAY, _8_creations.
What do you call yourself, a failed poet?
The word failed for me doesn't really sting in that way when I was referring to myself as a failed poet. It just doesn't come easily to me. So I think I've written a few pieces in the past, but I've always found it very hard to understand what my poetry style's like. It ends up being a mixture of journaling. You know, I'm sure a lot of people who start out with journaling as a practice and then it turns into something more poetic. And that's definitely my journey. But there was a point where I was like, do I want to take poetry more seriously or make it a practice? And so when I say failed, it means I've just kind of stopped practicing it on a daily basis or more intentionally. If it comes to me, great. But it's sort of moved from poetry into comedy and joke writing, which is such a beautiful journey. I was trying to look up the definition of poetry and there probably is no fixed one. I get that with the rise of Instagram in the last 5-10 years, there's like the Instagram poet and maybe more traditional poets are like, that's not poetry, blah, blah, blah. But a person last year in summer told me that prayer can be poetry, and I thought that was really interesting with my Indian background, spiritual roots, and yeah, I pray quite a lot. And then there's times where my prayer, the words do sound more like poetry when I'm more thoughtful and intentional about them. So prayer as poetry can be really interesting. And even with scripture across religious texts or spiritual scriptures, I'm sure there is a poetry to how they're written in some ways. So yeah, all is to say I no longer write poetry or in an intentional route about writing a poem. It's now morphed into like joke writing.
When did you start writing poetry?
I was doing the morning pages journaling technique where you just write unconsciously. That was many years ago, like 2018, 2019. But then the first sort of poetry came to me about 2021, 2022, where I was on this 1-year program, not group therapy, but a container where you could check in as a group each month and we could share our writing. It didn't have to be poetry, but people often wrote poetry. So that was the first time I really started in 2021. I was very nervous around sharing stuff, but built up a bit more confidence. And then a few pieces came from that. Well, last summer mainly, 2024 summer was like, I think I had a breakthrough around how it started morphing into one line. Like my poetry ended up being like a punchline. It always had a punchline and I was like, oh, these aren't poems, these are jokes. And so there was this, it took me a while to realize that, but yeah.
Looking back at how you grew up and your roots, is there something of the prayer as poetry before you started doing poetry?
I don't think I'd thought about prayer in that way before. But I now see it in reflection. In hindsight, I now see it. If there's a prayer that I'm doing, gratitude or a blessing for someone, I think it's the intentionality I put behind the words, which can be, you know, with poetry, it's like the intentionality you're putting on the page. And I think that's like that same process. And being mindful about every word that you're saying. I think, yeah, there's prayers that I say where I'm like, oh, I didn't mean that. And then like trying to undo it in my head. So yeah, I think it's just like that process of creating and slowing down.
When did you start referring to yourself as failed poet?
Oh, just recently. Maybe knowing that you were doing these sort of interviews, I was like, I wouldn't say I'm a poet even though I've written a few things.
And what was it about, I guess, coming to this interview or the announcement that you kind of started attributing yourself to a failed poet?
Yeah, I thought about the few pieces I have written in the past. There's a couple of things that came to mind. One was a lot of the poetry. So I've definitely read a lot of poetry before I started writing. Rupi Kaur comes to mind, Kai Cheng Tom, and then around more recently Ocean Vuong and Young Pueblo, and then I found some South Asian anthologies in the last year or two. So that, like, I've read poetry. There's a beautiful project called the Poetry Pharmacy or something like that. It doesn't exist, but it's just this poet who would go around the UK and prescribe a poem as a type of medicine. This is for happiness, this is for depression, this is for grief. So I've got that poetry book, and that really stood out. But what I realized when reading a lot of these books, apart from like the more Instagram style friendly ones, is that I really struggled to connect sometimes with the words. Like, maybe it's just the way my brain works. Like, I couldn't sometimes see the metaphors or the similes or the story that was being told as vividly as some other people can. Like, some people can connect with like a poet and be like, oh my gosh, straight away. So yeah, there was just something missing. And then there was this one poem I read about a year and a half, 2 years ago, which was a poem, but it has a very funny ending. Asghari and the Tree of Destiny, 1933, by Layla Sumpton. She cantered into the village with a satchel full of condoms, square-wrapped destinies, the rubbery power of no. Family trees quivered at her invasion, and the land, tired at being divided and divided till there was no space to grow, uttered a sigh. Finally, someone and something to battle hunger, give village women a break from endless cycles of birthing. No men allowed at the meeting. The plan was simple. Gather women, describe, persuade, distribute, then canter back to Lahore for the dinner she was hosting. She finished her speech, glad she remembered to speak slower, but they just stared. Some giggled. The revolution had not landed. She would have to demonstrate, and cursed her lack of props. She broke a stick, showed the ladies how easy it was to apply. Suddenly there were smiles, nods, general enthusiasm, an empty satchel, canter home. Months later she returned, keen to see how her gifts, her magic packets had empowered these ladies. They sat under the meeting tree, bellies blooming and defiant. We did what you asked. Your covers do not work, see? We all put them on the tree like you showed us. And it brought me so much laughter, and I was like, oh, like, this is what I connect with more. There was like this moment of like, I'm actually looking for something from the writing that I didn't realize I was looking for. So that's sort of been my journey, yeah.
Humor?
Humor, lightness, I would say, even if it's not, because I get poetry for healing and grief and trauma and identity, and I'm still figuring out a lot of that stuff myself, but I guess my practices around those emotions don't revolve around poetry as much. They have other ways of processing that. And my practices for humor and lightness, I'm like, yeah, I can get that from the written word a lot better, a lot easier, sorry, than I can with a poem. Yeah.
What were you mentioned a bit about your first poems, your early ones.
Yeah.
What were they about?
Yeah, so I was on this 12-month program, and it was all around sexuality, actually. So my first poem that I shared publicly ever was this poem called Unrequited. And that was about many years after the fact, realizing maybe my first romantic love that wasn't, what's the right word? Romantic love that was probably good for my nervous system and wasn't me trying to grab at something that wasn't there, was unrequited. And I only realized that many years after that, being in that space with that person. So that the poem was about that and realizing that, and I was like, oh, that's what love actually is. And that, yeah, that was a nice little poem that I wrote about that.
Was there a common theme among your early poems?
Identity was a big one. South Asian colonization, South Asian roots, a few on sexuality. Those seem to be the main ones. Yeah, 2022 to 2023, I was sort of very lost. I was on different medication and things, and I just felt so disconnected from my body. So I was just trying to write anything that would help me feel.
Was it explicit? The political messages or the colonial messages?
There was no metaphor, it was just a pure rage, lots of rage, writing, disconnected from land, ancestors, stolen knowledge, lost languages, stolen medicine, stolen ways of being. A lot of that stuff can still be, I've healed a lot of that, but it can still feel quite visceral for me as well. So yeah, I think the poetry I have in my journals, or my writings about that in my journals, felt very strong at the time. But even that, I think I've moved more to humor because I don't want to be stuck in that. Personally, I don't want to be stuck in that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I want to acknowledge that and not forget it, but also like try and move on from it.
When did you start identifying as trans?
I think it was 2021. Came out as non-binary, or felt non-binary. And then the ongoing journey of feeling into, there'll be occasions where I dress way more femme, but I'm still sort of figuring that out for myself. So whether it's a non-binary trans femme identity or a trans woman identity, I'm not fully sure yet. But regardless of the labels, my energy felt very much like a balance. So they, them, or a balance of masculine and feminine. And then actually my artistic performance side feels much more expressive and feminine. So 2021 with an ongoing journey around that still, which I don't think I've finished.
And that comes in reflection with your pronouns?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So this was before you started writing poetry?
It was, yeah. I'd done some yoga. It was like a yoga practice with someone one-to-one for a few weeks, and there was like some real healing that happened, and a real more understanding of my internal energy during that, or just before that and during that. And then, but it's only in the last 2 years I've probably been embodying that more. I think I dealt with it very intellectually in my first couple of years. Very like unlearning of the paradigms of like, oh, does masc mean this? Does femme mean this? Do I have to now do this? Do I now have to? And now more and more so, it's more like, okay, what does my body tell me, rather than the constructs.
Has it come into play in your poetry?
Gender and poetry, in my jokes it has, not in my poetry. I'm remembering some journal writings I did around Shiv, the masculine in Hinduism, and Shakti, the feminine, and writing about these two polarities and what they mean for me personally. But they weren't really, again, these are just journal writings, but that's probably the extent of the writings that I've done around it, around gender, from a more yogic, energetic perspective. And I really love Alok. They're activist, poet, comedian. Their poetry and comedy, actually, interesting. I was putting that together. has really like resonated with me. Obviously, they're South Asian as well. Right now, I'm trying to learn a lot more about Hijra people, third gender people in India, South Asia as a whole, but India specifically. And so that's also where my journey's taken me right now as well. But yeah, with my writing, I'm some elements in the past, but not explicit poems around gender. No.
How does your trans identity, non-binary identity, intertwine with your cultural identity?
Through a few things, understanding more about the gender as energy through yogic practices, Shakti practices, or understanding Shiv as a masculine energy. That's been a big part in the last year. In London in the last few years, I lived abroad actually in Canada for a few years, but I came back to London 2022, and I noticed there was more like queer Bollywood dance classes and collectives that have popped up. And I thought that was really cool to see any type of person wearing any type of outfit in a Bollywood dance class. I thought that was really cool. I have read about sort of Hijra people in South Asia, India, but not gone deep. So that's literally been the start of my journey in the last couple of months, is to learn more about that, potentially with a trip to India next year around that and meeting some people, building some community. But the shame is that when the English came to India, they outlawed a lot of, well, they outlawed everything, homosexuality, said that trans people were cross-dressers and outlawed that. And so what's wild is like 200 years ago, maybe it was more of a paradise for Hijra folks, trans folks, and now it's still more progressive than the UK, where they've recognised their gender folks legally. But the unlearning of like the English laws to get back to a place where they were before. Yeah, I want to learn more about India in the next year. To understand, even state by state, obviously it's different to which states are more trans friendly, which states aren't. So I want to explore that in more depth.
Were you born in the UK or did you immigrate to the UK?
Born in the UK, yeah.
Okay, so you're trying to go back to your roots, I guess, to learn more.
Yeah, The last 3 years has been a lot of learning about India, yeah.
Okay.
Or even just at home where we live in London, family recipes and cultural events and things like that, which has been really nice.
If you could speak about kind of spirituality and if it has how has it influenced your poetry?
Yeah, I think I feel more connected to the earth in the last few years. Maybe through my healing, or as I lean more into my trans identity, there's more of a synchronicity or an understanding of the energy around me when it comes to nature, which is beautiful. And sort of the spiritual practices that underpin that for me, whether it's making a land offering, doing a puja with a flame, just prayer by my altar in the mornings, praying to ancestors. And yeah, whilst it's not necessarily written, the words that come to me are more poetic in those moments. Like they feel deeper than how I would have prayed. Well, not that I prayed much before, but they feel just much more like poetry. I just don't write it down. There's a form of yoga, bhakti yoga, which involves a lot of mantra and chanting. And that can be, the mantras are very simple and you just repeat them over and over again, but there's like poetry to those mantras once you understand the meaning of why you're saying them. And they can be very powerful. So that's a form of yoga that's been really special to me in the last I started that in 2021 actually, but have really deepened that in London in the last 3 years. So.
In what language do you pray?
I pray in English. Sanskrit is just for the mantras that I know. Those are a form of prayer actually. So yeah, actually Sanskrit for the ready-made prayers, and then English for my own prayers.
Do you know any other language?
We speak Gujarati at home. I'm born in a Gujarati household, but we fluctuate between that and English.
Have you made any poems in Gujarati?
No, can't write it, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you identify, and how do you identify now compared to before, if it's different?
Yeah, definitely from early 20s onwards, straight, and then probably around 29, 30, 31, just had this awakening around that, thinking, again, it was all intellectual at the time. It was just like little bits of things, with little insights come to me, and I just try and process it academically without connecting it up with my body. So it was like, oh, I think I'm queer, or I think I'm gay, and my friends would be like, no, you can't be, and then you're not, we know you too well. And then I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And then had sort of this bad year health-wise, and just I really distanced all of that. It wasn't a priority to even think about that for a good probably a year and a half. And then when I came out the other side of that, have lent more into that queer identity. And that's when I wrote that poem I was saying, Unrequited, and the poem, and I shared it. And that was good because I hadn't really owned that part of me publicly or in a group of strangers before, which was great.
Where did you share it?
It was online. It was like on a Zoom call with like 20 of us or 15 of us. This was a 12-month program unpacking sexuality and sensuality, and it was like a structured program, but we met up once every month. But a lot of the program was journaling and writing, reflecting back to the group what you've been journaling about. So.
Do you perform?
Just in not in open mics. It'll be like with friends, or if I'm been lucky enough to do a lot of like yoga, retreats or courses or Indian music courses in the last couple of years. So I'll perform my comedy there. I've never performed, apart from a few poems that I've said out loud, I've never performed poetry.
When did you start performing at these places?
That's recent, so it would have been last summer.
And by that time, was it that you switched to comedy?
Comedy, yeah, last summer, yeah.
Well, how was it for you, the journey of switching?
So around April 2024, was writing a lot. Ideas, poems, journaling, trying to really figure out a creative hobby to pursue. I don't think there was one thing. I think, so then I went on this yoga retreat last summer, and through the yoga practices, I realized something unlocked in me, some inner child healing unlocked. And throughout the entire retreat for 5 days, I could barely stop writing during the yoga practices. I just had my journal next to me, and the practitioner, she was fine with it. Everyone was on their own journey, own process. And then all of this jokes and ideas just started flowing to me. Some would come as I was in a different pose or posture, and I would have something new pop up, and I'd be like, where did that come from? So it was just like this very embodied process during this, magical portal for a week, and something shifted. And then during that retreat, I gifted everyone their own individual joke. So that's become my thing now. So I've done it 5 or 6 times in different group settings where I've gotten to know people and then just like sent them a joke, and if they all agree, I'll put it into like a PDF and send it out as a reminder of our time together. So that's been really nice. And in between April and when that yoga retreat happened in June, July, I'd been thinking about gaming a lot, like board games. So I think my mind was already being primed for like a more playful energy. I was in this like game creation state, and it was very much seeing the world around me as a game, and like it sort of just flowed out from there, which was cool.
Has comedy been a part of your life for long before you started writing it?
Yes, but unintentionally. Whether it's a random, I used to go to London quite a lot actually. I don't know if it's still there. Friday night Angel Comedy Club, or Saturday night. Used to love that place. Used to go all the time. Then when I moved out of London, did probably less in Canada. Sort of going to stand-up comics and comedians. And then when I came out to London, I think I always missed British comedy when I lived abroad. I used to love The Peep Show. And then there's some American shows. Curb Your Enthusiasm has always stuck with me. I love that show. Malcolm in the Middle was like my favorite growing up. I used to read the first things I ever used to read were like the Beano, the comics. I'd go theatre, but like the Book of Mormon is the one I remember out of all the plays I've watched most, or the feeling I've had from it. Always loved Pixar instead of like adult films. Don't mind adult films, but Pixar films are just so great for me. So yeah, there's like things there. It's like, again, that inner child, where my inner child lights up. So yeah.
Does your transness and cultural identity intertwine with your comedy when you write it down?
Some of the jokes I have, it'll be yoga from a trans perspective, interacting with a guru or a teacher in the class. Like, I have some jokes like that, yeah. But it's not like the main theme of it.
And you've done these in front of other people?
The gifting of jokes, when I gift people personalized jokes. And then, yeah, I've read out a few of those. I have like a 40-page Google Doc of all the jokes I wrote last year, which I've been trying to edit and figure out if it fits a self-published book or not. But the big theme around them is probably like spirituality and comedy.
How do you feel when you perform them?
Yeah, pretty good. I think the act of performing the comedy actually, I think when I've written it down, it's fine, but actually when I deliver it, the punchline doesn't, like the timing's off. So it's actually the act of saying them out loud which helps me understand if they're as funny as I wanted them to be. That's happened a few times where I've nailed this, like this is so funny, and then I've delivered it and it's like, people like, oh, I'm like, oh, interesting. So saying them out loud really helps. And then they also sound more conversational as well, which I like. Well, the same time, I had written the poem about unrequited and understanding what love can feel like when it's not attachment. Was also during that 12-month program where I was thinking about chess as a game. And I was like, oh, what if the pieces in chess were like characters in a musical? So that was another poem I wrote, and probably led me into more of the comedy realm, because I wanted to make each piece really exaggerated on their characteristics and behaviors. So that's another time my poetry started going down the line of comedy as well. There's another poem that led into, which I wrote down, of like why we always look for the perfect things to put in our home. Like, why don't we have cracked objects? And it's like, are we just suffocating ourselves with perfection culture all the time? And the poem I wrote after that was walking along the beach and seeing like a shiny white shell and then like a cracked purpley brown one. And I automatically wanted to pick that one. And then I was like, why don't I want that one? And I think there's such a insight into my psyche, or even collective psyche, of like, how do we want to airbrush everything? And in some way I felt like the cracked brown one was how we treat like homeless people. And I mentioned I volunteered at different homeless charities for many years, but bringing that up because it's like, oh, I don't want to look at that one. I want that shiny one for myself. There's like the beauty in being an amateur right now for me, where I don't need to know the techniques and as soon as it's like, oh no, there's like 11 funny filters you should use and for your writing, and it's like that becomes a whole different ball game. So right now I'm enjoying this like poetry comedy phase, gifting people poems. Might also work for my attention span as well. So.
The freedom of not competing.
Yeah.
Because you're not in the box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that is the big one actually. And like I said, as soon as I'm like, oh, I want to get better at this. I'm like, oh no, there are actual techniques I would have to follow and learn, and I'd actually have to practice this. And the lazy part of me is like, I just don't want to do that right now. So, yeah, my dream is to run like this, like a South Asian led. So for any person, but South Asian led or inspired, maybe is the better word. South Asian inspired comedy collective that intersects between like spiritual learning, comedy / humor, and like services that can help people connect with each other, whether that is board games or music, spiritual Indian music events which have a comedy theme to them, kind of like musicals. Yeah, that's something I want to try and build.
There's something we haven't gotten to, which is your attire.
My attire.
Yeah, you wanted to get changed specifically, so I'm guessing it holds some meaning to you to be on camera with it.
Yeah, I think this is from India. When I was in Rishikesh in April. This is from Italy actually, and I just wear it up. Well, it's more of a summer, spring thing, but we'll see. The weather's fine for now. Just wanted to feel more flowy whilst doing this interview. And then this is, I guess, traditionally Hindu. I forget the name of this seed actually. Maybe these are plastic, but maybe they're real. But then I got this from Pakistan, 2023, when I was there for a wedding. So Muslims will wear this. I forget the name. I should remember it. But so I'm wearing something Hindu and something Muslim from Islam. So I think I'm leaning into bridge building between Indians and Pakistanis. One of my close friends, his best friends one of them is Pakistani. That's whose wedding I went to. And it really opened my eyes because not a lot of British Indians or Indians get to go to Pakistan. And really, yeah, imagining how it was just all one country not long ago. And the horrors of partition and like how politicized religion's become, like it's lost all true meaning and been co-opted by political movements, and just sows division. So yeah, on my altar at home, and sometimes I just choose to wear this, and meant to be going to a Hindu cultural event tonight, and I'm proud to be able to rep this as well as this.
When do you wear this? Or just for the interview?
No, I would wear this in spring or summer as well if I was just out. I just haven't worn it in a while, so I decided to wear it today. This I kind of wear on and off, and then these two, haven't worn this in a while, and this I started wearing again in the last 2 weeks.
Is it all package or is it just individual pieces?
Individual pieces, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you ever foresee yourself stopping poetry?
The style of sort of poem jokes I share, no. I get a lot of joy about gifting them to people. And I'm trying to complete a collection right now for 10, 15 people who I was with a couple of weeks ago. They're also a beautiful way to remember the people you were with in terms of like reflecting, oh, who was that person? What were they like? What were my interactions with them like? What did I say to them? Do I remember that correctly? Like, there's such a beautiful way for me to just remember that person. So not that style of gifting. And then the poetry I shared today, there's 3-4 pieces, probably not. Though I'm kind of I feel stuck with that collection because it literally is 40 pages of, maybe 30 pages of poems, but I don't know how to organize them into something. And then, yeah, like I said, the journey of, do I go deeper with comedy and am I prepared to, like, the discipline and the work to become better is an open question right now.
Mm.
I have had a lot of requests actually for the poems I've shared to be spoken out loud rather than written out. People seem to like my voice, or if I send someone a joke on WhatsApp voice note, like it lands a lot better than if I just send it as a written thing. So I'm sitting with that to be like, do I just like, even with the jokes I've written, do I just like put them on a website and just have them so people can listen to them? Don't know.
There's more of a start for you in the future, or now and in the future, going into comedy.
Oh, it's definitely like happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I started reading books and working with an editor on that comedy, on the joke book with the spiritual jokes. I just, and then the South Asian inspired collective, I think, putting that out there and trying to work towards that as well.
Mm.
Yeah. I would say actually, it reminds me, and I know you've interviewed a few people, I think one of the guests you had, they said it can be, they would prefer to work in a collective or something like that. And I sense that for myself deeply. It's probably the reason I like gifting jokes to people in a group rather than being like, I'm just going to sit on my own and write comedy. Mm. I find the community participation of it a lot more inspiring for me personally, and like something I would want to lean more into. So if I can build a collective, that would be great. And then the theme can be like I said, spirituality comedy or education spirituality comedy, but then we can produce many different types of services that help the community, queer community. So yeah, I definitely more towards a collective. And then in that way, I don't necessarily have to become a expert in something, like can rely on 3 or 4 people I'm working with who bring the expertise. So yeah.
Do you see yourself writing comedy in a language other than English?
No, I don't think so. Oh, I really love, okay, so there's a lot of Instagram accounts popped out the last few years, which takes the piss out of Gujarati parents and elders and how they are in the house and like how they would shout at you to clean the house or do your homework. And it's like young people in their 20s and 30s who have amazing Gujarati, like they can fluent. So I'm jealous of that as it is. But then they'll just nail the act that they're doing, like someone's mum getting angry that they're not married yet and stuff like that. So yeah, there's like an element of wanting to maybe learn a few more Gujarati words that I would have learned growing up, and using them in some way, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So it'd be a very specific, like just Gujarati comedy. Which reminds me, actually, one of the projects I do want to do, there's the Bhagavad Gita, one of the spiritual texts, and it's basically a war between two sides, spiritual battle, and what's right and what's wrong for you to do in that moment. And I want to start reading that I've skimmed it but not read it properly. But then do a little joke comedy book or something, like two corner shops, like two newsagents, and one is like old school, and then the other one wants to like become better and get more customers, and Krishna himself becomes like the consultant for that one, and he introduces like all of these like DE&I policies and all of these wacky ways to improve like the the corner shop operations. And I have an ending in mind already, and this one's changing and becoming more tech driven, and this one's doing its other thing, and it's a battle of two corner shops. So maybe I'll infuse some Gujarati words into that.
Do you see yourself learning to read it?
Maybe I would be open to it. I'd need to find the time for it. Yeah, I need to find the time for it. It's all pointing towards like being in India for like a good 6 to 12 months at some point. And then maybe I'll figure it out there. But then at that point, maybe I'd like to learn Hindi instead. It's just more, as it's just a bit more of a universal language in India, and better for like singing Bollywood songs as well. So yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind is just like building on how it can feel lonely being a writer, a poet, a musician, whatever art or craft that you're into, even as a hobby, hobbies that people take up. I read a book, Murakami's book on how to write a novel, I think, last year. It was a fascinating book, and he essentially said, I don't know why you would ever choose to write a novel. It's like the most hardest thing you can think of, and painful. And I would just say, how can you serve people in your life? Doesn't have to be strangers, can be friends, family, try to figure out how you can serve them in very small ways through your art. It can just literally be sharing a small piece of writing saying, hey, look, I wrote this for you, or I was thinking about you, gifting people on their birthdays, or new moon, full moon, intention settings with people through your art, like a way to turn your art into service. And I think that I've learned that a lot in the last few years through my spiritual practice of like, yes, look after yourself, resource yourself. Obviously for trans people right now, it's extremely difficult. But is there a way, if you're feeling lonely, like actually you can build connection through serving other people? Why are altars to departed loved ones always pictures of them smiling? I want an altar that has my grandma looking real mean and grumpy. At least that way, when I walk past her, I can stop and say, and I thought I was having a bad day. Normalize moody altars.